Hello. Can you hear me? I can't hear you. Now I hear you.
Oh, you can hear me now?
Yeah. That's weird.
Oh, okay. Great.
How are you?
Great. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
So, I'm excited to walk you through surveys and our impact evaluation today.
Cool.
So Flick couldn't make it, but hopefully recording is working.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think I have to do anything else to get it to record.
Yeah, it's live already, so
It's recording.
Yeah.
Great. So, I actually ended up planning a lot more for the judging walkthrough than I did for this one, but I'll just do the walkthrough and hopefully it'll help you get equipped with everything that you need to know. So I'll screen share in order to show you what I'm doing as I'm pulling it up.
Perfect, I see.
Okay, great.
I will mute me, okay?
Okay, so so the main things that I was thinking we can go through are one, what our design approach is for impact evaluation. How are we thinking about impact evaluation? And then I'll show you the platform that we chose and why it is that we chose that. And then I'll share a few things related to the like specific to surveys that are important to know, that tie to like our methodology that we're hoping to establish for doing surveys. So I think just key terms that are really important to know about. And which include like the feedback loop and constituent voice, as well as transactional versus relationship surveys. And then we'll end by actually walking through like the process and timelines that it would be great for project managers to be responsible for. So I will paste this proposed agenda in the chat over here, in case that helps.
Great.
And of course, hopefully lots of time for discussion, and feel free to ask questions along the way as well. So, so can you see my screen okay?
I see perfect.
Okay, instead of having all of the links open, I'm actually going to just show you how I navigate to get there in case you wanted to find any of these afterwards. Although we'll also try to maybe just have a little summary slide at the end that leads through the links that we went through.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh, for this one, I just ended up Googling it actually. Engagement. So we've been working really hard at figuring out what it is that we want to measure in order to know whether we're being successful with our vision for engagements or not. And we talked about at the retreat how we want to incorporate even more measures that help us, again, know more specifically related to networks and more specifically related to framework change that we want to pilot. But until then, we did sort of go through a really great amount of work figuring out, so given what our vision is for engagements around framing and convening and igniting, and given our knowledge of what it takes in order to make for a successful network, what are the main outcomes that we're looking to achieve when we have any engagement that we have. So I'm just trying to present this here. And so what this is outlining is different things that we identified as being really important. So that would help us towards the framing, convening, and igniting. So something related to having a stimulating conversation, a shared identity, a shared communications grid, that we attract high potential innovators, thought leaders, and partners, that they're exchanging new and diverse resources, that they are benefiting from visibility, that they're evolving their thinking, so this is especially tied to knowledge and learning and their strategy into the sector, that they feel it was worth their time, both for the innovators and the partners, and internal outcomes that are really important to us related to that we are confident in the sustainability and the impact of the engagement, and we're profitable and financially efficient. So what we did after identifying those as the big ones, so it seems like a lot, but it's essentially 10, especially because these are very similar. It's 10 big outcomes that we feel are ways to understand whether we're meeting our vision or not. What we did after that is we said, okay, so we know what our big outcome is that we want to understand. Given that that's what we want to measure, let's break it down into specific performance indicators that we think help us to understand this. So in the example of a stimulating conversation that the sector is experiencing, what are some things that would allow us to gauge that? So we thought, if people are searching for a specific term that's the key core of our engagement, and we're seeing an increase in those searches, that's something that might help us give a sense of that. The number of followers on Twitter might give us a sense of that, and we have a few other metrics here. So each different indicator that we're trying to measure has a different instrument that would be helpful towards measuring it. And there are different people that are responsible for gathering that data in the engagement. So our goal is to make sure that every engagement has determined and is designed with our engagement outcomes in mind. So as we just do a really quick survey through here, a skim through this, we see that when it comes to network identity, there are different things that we think are needed for that, and and this is, I guess, a bit of a draft because you're seeing some repeats here, but as we were working through it, that a survey was one of the tools that would be really important. But I want to share that when it comes to us doing our impact evaluation, we've thought about carefully like what our big outcomes are, what we think we can measure based upon those, and then what different instruments and different people are responsible so that we get a really great full picture at the very end. So this is all available here, and I'll just plop this link in here in case that ends up being like a
thank you.
engagement outcomes. So what I won't go two other things that we've been experimenting with related to this is, okay, so if you do go through and document and gather all of this, what's the best way for us to be able to see that information? So has anyone showed you Gecko board yet? Okay.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, Matt showed us.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. So that was one way that we were experimenting to figure out how we want to be able to display the outcomes. And another and there's one other experiment that I'll show you about that we're going to be planning to work towards related to that, but I will plan to show that to you later because, what's the point of gathering all the data if it's not leading to decisions and visibility and allowing us to shift and see, oh my gosh, we haven't been doing enough in this area. Let's make sure we shift resources to that. So we've really been trying to get better at that. So with that in mind, what we did was we've been working on being able to be more consistent with the surveys that we've been distributing. And we've been doing surveys to some degree, but not in a way that was really consistent after each engagement, during each engagement. So after a lot of research, we ended up selecting a platform that was an enterprise level way for us to be able to run surveys. So a lot of the background information about the work we've been doing within that is in this under Ashoka Changemakers knowledge team. There's a Changemakers impact folder, and we've done different presentations for the team on how exciting it was for us to have selected this platform. Just as a bit of history about it, we finally signed the contract for it earlier this year, and we got, in order for us to be able to make the pricing for it, we were able to get approval for 8 different teams who contributed funding for this contract. And what we get with that is we have 5 user accounts, so folks all over Ashoka that are using this survey platform with us. A certain number of responses that we are limited to within that, which is 12,000. They're providing us with trainings. And what we did was we actually researched 11 different platforms, and we created a bit of and figured out, okay, what was really important for us for our survey platform. One thing, for example, that was really, really important is the ability to run our surveys in multiple languages without having to re-aggregate the data. So when it comes to Google Forms, if you wanted to run a survey in Spanish, you'd have to make a copy of it and then translate all of it, and then all the data would be in 3 or 4, depending on how many languages you did it in, sheets. And this is one of the things that makes on this platform that it's very good for. And there were other factors as well. And then the different teams that are all using the platform are all listed here as well. So it'll be really exciting because it'll give us an opportunity to compare about what we're all learning from our different approaches to engaging changemakers. And yeah, so the key things that make it a really powerful surveying tool include the fact that it allows for relationship tracking. So imagine if, like, Gilly, when you go to engage with the Millicom Foundation, or as Flick steps in more in the Unilever partnership, if she could go back and see, even let's say if we'd had a relationship with them 5 years ago, if she could go in and see what their feedback had been tied to their Salesforce record, and in a way that's a bit automated. Some other cool things that it does is that, let's say someone who's really important to us, or especially someone that we're focusing on building a relationship with, if they tell us that they're not happy with us, it can trigger an automatic email to us or an automatic email to them saying that whatever we wanted to say. It might be like, thank you so much for giving the feedback. Is there something more that we can do together? Whatever it might be. The reporting is great. The language translation I talked about. The action-based triggers, which I mentioned, which is, for example, if they give us a very low satisfaction score, I can send an automatic email either to you or to them, so that we sort of really let them know that we hope that we value their feedback and we hope we can improve. And then the fact that they give training. So we're planning on running more in-depth trainings, probably at least 3 times a year. Their average wait time, I think, is something like I don't know, less than a minute or something, if you ever were like stuck on using the platform, any of us could just call them in order to learn more, or have their issue resolved. So just a few more slides to share that I think will be helpful before I do a walkthrough of how the platform works is this concept of the feedback loop. I'll start with this one at the very end. Have you heard about the feedback loop yet, Gilly?
No, I haven't.
So we actually ran a competition dedicated to this. It was called Close the Feedback Loop. So on changemakers.com, it's Close the Loop. And I'll just paste in here in the chat the and then this competition may be of interest, but we joined a consortium of people who were trying to help ensure that the social sector, including philanthropy and governance and just everyone, can be better at really listening to the constituents that they're serving and making decisions based upon the feedback that's coming through. So we've been working with them. We launched this as a part of the consortium. We helped launch this challenge as a way to have people share that they're passionate about this and what they're doing related to it. And then we've been working on this toolkit where people are going to be able to take a quiz and get an understanding of what their strengths or weaknesses are on closing the feedback loop. And working with the partners there, including Keystone Accountability, we helped to refine the stages of the feedback loop, which include, first designing, so figuring out what your strategy is for surveying, which is what I shared with you around, like, okay, do we understand our theory of change? Do we know what questions we need to ask in order to figure that out? Then actually collecting the data, of which surveys are one tool, as we shared, but there are multiple different ways that we may get feedback, including just the conversations that we have with our network members. Then actually making sure we do a good job analyzing the data and being very authentic to what is coming across as strong, but also what might be weaknesses. And then once we have an understanding, actually dialoguing with the folks around, well, it seems like this is, from what we're looking at, this is what we're understanding, this is what we're thinking of doing, what do you think? So it really being like a two-way process, and then making sure that we make decisions based upon the data that came through, and we follow through on it. And ideally it's a loop so that we continue to do it. Just to share, for example, one big weakness that we've had is we might collect the data, but we might not actually analyze it in a really meaningful way. We might come to some ideas of decisions, but we might not actually double check that the conclusions seemed accurate. And one of the biggest weaknesses, not just for us, but many people feel, is making sure that we really make changes based upon the feedback that's come through.
Mm-hmm. And on which challenge have you used the feedback loop already?
Sorry?
On which challenges have you used the feedback loop already?
The feedback loop? Well, we're trying with each of the surveys that we're doing, but I don't think we've been able to reach this. So what I'm trying to help us all figure out together is how we can be better at getting to this course correction stage. So we're all learning together. I think, yeah, I haven't seen the loop be complete in a way that is in a way that was intentional, as opposed to, for example, oh, well, a lot of people, like, I've been hearing this a lot, okay, let's make this change. And that's good as well, but there is a good amount of data that was coming through, so I'll share with you some things that we would love for project managers to be, engagement managers to be champions of, so that we can be better at doing this in a way that doesn't feel rushed or burdensome. The other two things just to mention is the difference between a transactional survey versus a relationship survey. So the idea is that a transactional survey is a quick survey that you might send right after someone just had an interaction with you. So you'll probably encounter this, like if you go to buy a phone, or if you have an interaction with a business or something, where you might immediately get an email in your inbox having people ask you, hey, what did you think? So the key thing to that is that you do it in a very timely way, and you keep it very short. And so that's something that we have as a part of our surveying methodology, and I'll tell you more about that. And then the other type of survey is a relationship survey. So that's a deeper survey that you want to send to people maybe at least once, but no more than twice a year, in order to get their in-depth feedback about how things are going. And the last thing to share that is just really useful to know about, that we've been excited as we design our surveying strategy in particular, as a subset of impact evaluation, is this concept of a Net Promoter Score. Have you heard of this before? You're on mute.
On the retreat, you mentioned it quite a bit.
Oh, okay. Is it helpful for me to give an overview, though, or you have a good sense of it?
Yeah, please.
So let me see if I can find a picture that explains it, actually. Let's see here. I think that we have a guide to the Net Promoter Score, actually. Let's see where it would be. I think if I just type in here Net Promoter Score. Yeah, we created an overview, Net Promoter Score overview.
Mm-hmm.
So, and so you can read more about that. This place, it's right in there. But yeah, so the Net Promoter Score is something that has been used for a couple of decades, especially usually by for-profit companies thus far. And it just asks in the past, although it's been gaining in its adoption, it's just one simple question, which is, how likely are you to recommend our company to a colleague or a friend? And it is something that has been shown to be like very, very insightful and informative. And what you do is you use a 0 to 10 scale, so you can get a full range, because like when we use a 0 to 5 scale, then you find most people are just like clustering around 3 or 4. So it doesn't really give you a really insightful sense of where people are at. Whereas what they say is that, okay, if people are answering a 9 or a 10, let's say the question is, how likely are you to recommend Apple to a colleague or friend? Then they're your promoters. They love you. They're passionate about you. They're very loyal to wanting to use Apple and only Apple. But if they are sort of the 7 and 8, then they don't hate you, but they're not super duper pumped about you, and they might just as easily use something else as well. And the detractors are the people who are scoring within the 0 to 6 range. And those are people who are really not that happy with you. And so what folks what they do is they say you can get a bit of a score if you just subtract the number of people who are promoters from the people who are detractors, in order to see like what your net number of promoters are. So for example, let's say 80 out of 100 respondents are all here. They gave you a 9 or a 10, but then 10 of them are over here. So that would then be 80 minus 10 equals, 10% would mean that you have like a 70% promoter score. And so the really cool thing is that you can, because so many people are asking this similar question, you can compare yourself to others in the field as well as other different intervention types that we are doing within Ashoka or within Changemakers, and get a sense of how you stack up versus others, or just in the very least so that we can benchmark against our own and see how we're doing. The semifinalists for LEGO Foundation, for example, which was a subset of I think about 190 or so, a large number of people. We had a great response rate to that survey, and they got a score of 72, I believe. So that means, like, I don't know exactly what the breakdown is, but it means that, you know, let's say if 80 people out of 100 were here, and then there were only 10% that were actually the detractors, so that's how they were able to get a really high score. The majority of people really were here instead of here. And that's interesting because we had a very small one that we did where with like judges for a competition that were like very critical, and we had a score of like -35, meaning more people were here than they were as detractors and they were as promoters. So it's one tool. It's definitely not a perfect tool. It's not the end-all be-all tool. There are definitely criticisms, and we list over here a number of criticisms that we know there are weaknesses to it, but still reasons why we think it's helpful. And I'm lingering on it a little bit just because it's such an exciting pilot for us to be doing that is hopefully insightful, because we're asking all of the Ashoka teams to also include, like, no matter what else they're asking, to also include this question, so that you can see, for example, are people that, let's say, participated in our boot camp more enthusiastic, or people who are participating in, I don't know, the Ashoka U exchange, or is one fellowship cohort from one country more passionate than about and feeling more excited about Ashoka and therefore gaining more value than others. And the other example that I'll just give of why this can be very interesting, and the next stage that I hope we get towards is something that involves actually figuring out if there are correlations between certain factors. So let's say that this is like the Net Promoter Score, and I did this the wrong way. If this is like a high Net Promoter Score, and this is like, there was one organization that had people that are completing their program that leads to jobs. It was interesting because basically, like, and if they complete the program, they're more likely to be able to get employed. They found a really strong correlation between, like, if you were finding this to be a very, like, good service, you were more likely to also complete their program on a factor, whereas, like, if you were here, you were, like, a lot less likely. So, you know, if you were to get, let's say, in the first month that feedback, like, you would know that, wow, I really have to focus in on making sure this person is seeing that value, so that they get very enthusiastic, and then they're more likely to complete our program, which is a part of our social change theory. So we're going to be in an exploration to figure these things out. So maybe if you have a high Net Promoter Score, we did a better job making connections for you. So that's the Net Promoter Score. I'll pause there before moving on to the next thing. But do you have any questions that have come up so far?
So at what moment of the challenge would you ask this question? Is it like, right after getting their entry, or?
Yeah, really good question. Let's go over that now. So let me just, in order to break it up, because a lot of it's been pretty theoretical, let me jump to just showing you the platform, and then I'll move to actually sharing, like, what our different surveys are. Does that sound okay?
Sure.
And actually, when we do the walkthrough, it might help for that as well. So everybody should feel comfortable on our team logging in. So it's just qualtrics.com over here. And it's being a little slow. I don't know why.
And what is the username and password?
The username for us is Ashoka3. The password, because this is recorded, I'm just not going to say out loud. But I'll plan to get that to you.
Sure.
When the time is right. It's usually pretty fast. Okay, so over here you just log in, you have Ashoka3.
And that one is actually different because that one, if you click on it, it's only the link to the...
Here's Qualtrics, logging in. So this is our account for Changemakers. And this is showing us just something that's interesting in terms of the Claro competition, how many people have responded, when they were responding. So, you know, just like a little interesting thing you can see right when you log in. And the cool thing is it actually is showing you for other competitions as well. Although it says we haven't sent anything out. Oh, and it's giving. So that's pretty cool. But anyways, what you can see over here is all the different folders. So for whatever engagement you're working on, we'll end up, you know, creating a folder for it so that it's easy for you to find that per partner. We've created templates for each of the main types of surveys. But in order to sort of tell you about the surveys, I'll tell you about what our strategy is. But just an example is you can edit the survey by clicking on it over here. Generally, though, with the templates, basically, I don't think that we need to remove any questions. You can just add additional questions if you need to, and then the request is that you just share it with me for me to give a once-over, see if there are any tips for it before we actually launch it. And so it's cool because it allows us to do these matrix-style questions and then automatically tabulates it, which other platforms couldn't easily do for us. We have the Net Promoter Score question right over here, and it'll automatically calculate that for us as well. We kept everything else on a scale of 0 to 10 also, just to make it very consistent so the scales weren't changing. And you can do things like folks can put the translation right in here. I'm doing a very quick walkthrough. You don't have to worry about sort of grasping this right away. But it's really cool because you can pick which language you're adding. Let's say we were doing Spanish, and then you can just put the translation right in there, and then you can do a automatic mail merge where you can actually load all of the people that you want it to send to. You can have it send the email, so it'll mail merge right from in here, and then it'll also send the reminder message to the people who haven't yet responded. Right in here too, so you don't have to resend it to everybody and say, hey, don't forget to take it. It'll know who hasn't responded from your list yet, so that the reminder only goes to them. You can set up automatic thank you emails that go to them, or a thank you message and follow-up links to go to. So, and of course, you can sync the results to Salesforce. So let's say you were sending it to the judges and we wanted it to track to their Salesforce records about how they're feeling, especially like the Net Promoter Score. And then you can go and view the more detailed results. So we'll talk about, though, which ones we Salesforce integrate versus not.
And which platform did you use before you used this one?
Google Forms used to be the main one that we would use, but as we're ramping up and trying to do it in all the languages more consistently and cross-comparing and using the Net Promoter Score, Google Form couldn't, it didn't automatically calculate Net Promoter Score. And it couldn't handle like matrix questions and the translation. So there were lots of things that made it less ideal. We actually have here an in the comparison, yeah, the big thing was Google couldn't integrate easily, couldn't translate it easily. So it had a number of things that weren't very helpful. What didn't fit what we were looking for. Although it was definitely user friendly. So so yeah, and then what you can do is, like, when you're in a specific survey, like we can look at Lego, for example. You can actually look at let's see. So this is the one that was done with the semifinalists. We had 132 responses. You can actually do like analysis. Sorry, some pretty sophisticated things, including you can figure out like where people were dropping off on your survey, how many people opened it versus actually responded to it. So you can download the spreadsheet of it if you wanted to dive in that way, and you can look at the reports, and then you can customize the reports to include your commentary right in there. So this is an automatic version of what the responses were.
That's cool.
Yeah. Let's see. So not the results, but in reporting, we actually made one.
And do you have like all the different type of surveys included here, like the relationship survey and the transactional?
Yeah, we have templates for all of them. Oh, so here's what we're working towards is we're setting up a template so that everybody can report the takeaways from the survey in a similar way. So we're working on so you can tell like what the survey was. You can tell about some really quick, fast facts of big takeaways, and then just a bit of a narrative about it. Looking through all of the narrative feedback, we also, in our analysis, so you can actually edit their report template to put in your commentary on top of it. Highlights of the quotes, and then you can actually look at the detailed responses for each of the questions as well. Although I think there were more. But yeah, I'll tell you more about the process. But that's a bit of an overview about how the platform works. Any quick questions related to that before I walk through the process?
So like, who's like managing the platform in general? Is it you, or is it like each project manager, I suppose? That who's like if we do have any questions, who is the main person?
I and an intern who's dedicated to impact evaluation. This term, it's Miriam Mahdi, are folks that will be here to support you in making sure you're successful in distributing your surveys. What I'd love, actually, as a process to be is, let's see here. So there's a bit of a checklist here that we created that walks you through the process that we'd like people to know. So the very first step generally is figuring out what are the key transactions after which the surveys will be sent. We have a sense of that. Essentially, you want to send something right after people put in their entry to the challenge, after they were involved in helping to review the ideas, whether it was maybe external partners, like in the Lego case, Ashoka U professors helped to review ideas, or it might be the entrants that you asked to review the ideas. Maybe then you ask people to submit a second entry form right after the judging. So those are, I think, like really key transactions, like that we have exchanges and things that are time bound. So you want to just figure out, like, okay, when are each of those for the way I'm designing my challenge. And then, and we have the templates for each of those. And then sending a relationship survey, so figuring out what the main time is that we feel, okay, so all the entries are in, maybe all of the reviews have been done, there's sort of a lull now in the period, sending a quick message to say, okay, what did you think about? And we can ask the different questions. And then probably we're thinking of sending the same thing 6 months later to see if some of the impact has been more lasting as well. So the first step is definitely just identifying, okay, what are the key sort of, because every challenge sometimes ends up being slightly different, and just figuring out what those timings are and putting those into Teamwork PM. And then the next thing that we want to do is make sure that within your LRP you figure out who's responsible for customizing the survey. I would say usually it's the engagement manager with input from your team, of course. And then after you've looked at it, seen if you want to customize it, so what you would do here, for example, is you would go to the templates folder and you would say, okay, everybody just submitted their entry. So I'm going to make a copy, click on this, and then you change the title according to the titling. And we can also have it ready for you in a folder. We're new to this, so we can figure out the exact process. We could potentially have it all ready for you in a folder so that we've named it properly and things like that. So that it's ready for you to then see if you have any custom questions you really need to ask, although we want to try to keep things very, very short for the entrance. So you want to figure out who's going to be responsible and give us a heads up too, so we can plan to just review the template whenever it's ready or provide you with support if you're having trouble figuring out how to use the platform. And then you want to figure out who's responsible for distributing it. Again, I would say that it would fall in the engagement managers as the primary, but in a couple of them, the community managers have also been involved. Then we really want to make sure, and this is really important, that we set a date for analyzing the data. We've been working on creating like a how-to for that, and we'll train everybody on how to do it very easily. But we've just been working on creating a template, so it's easy to figure out, okay, how do I report this in a way that's reasonable. So far, our intern Miriam and our impact evaluation intern has been helping with the analysis, but we want to pretty soon, I think, especially now that we've figured out how we want to recommend doing the analysis, we want to shift it into the hands of the engagement manager doing the analysis portion, and us just giving feedback on the analysis, double checking that it's sound. Then setting a bit of a date to actually have a little bit of a back and forth, maybe setting up 2 or 3 calls that maybe the mobilizers have with entrants to see if some of the ideas that we've been having related to changes that we want to make, or if we've really understood the feedback well. And then lastly, sort of setting a date too for when you're going to discuss the results and discuss what changes you want to make as a result. So as an example, right, you would set, okay, when is the, so let's say the competition was closing tomorrow or this Monday on the 9th. So I would maybe want to send the survey out either like this next day or yeah, probably the next day right away, like let's say on the 10th. So you would want to make sure that you had sort of finalized the template for it and you knew how to do it and everything by maybe like the 5th. So you would have like maybe flagged it. And then you actually send it out. It's open maybe for a week. You have to set a reminder, a notice for sending out a reminder. And then you want to set the date for when are you going to analyze the data and who's going to be responsible for it. And of course, we can help as support in that. And then maybe you have your next LRP meeting on the 24th or something, making sure it's on the agenda to look at the results and then add to the report of what decisions you're making around course correction as a result of the data that's come through. So that's an idea that we've had for how to incorporate the feedback loop plan as a part of the survey distribution. And so we're very new to it right now, but we want to move towards not being able to send out any survey unless the dates are set for when all of these other steps will happen as well. Is that making sense so far?
Yeah, like
Okay.
Yeah, and the goal
by
is
step.
to not have it feel overwhelming, but very easy. So it's new, so we're experimenting and figuring out how to make it feel very, very easy. And I think the first time probably is the toughest, but after that,
I'll send my
it's
screen.
easier. So we have tips here on step 3 for so after you've done sort of your surveying plan and then your specific plan for closing the loop with your surveys, then you can feel free to customize the survey, although I think I'd be surprised if you were adding any more than 1 to 2 questions, or if you needed to add questions to it, because I think it is pretty comprehensive. But then what you want to do is just double check after you've done that, ask us to approve the survey, and we'll click launch in order to allow it to go live. And then someone on your team will be responsible for sending the survey, either using an anonymous link or using the mailing feature, which is what we actually recommend because it is just so useful. And of course, then actually going through and we want to share some part of the survey results with the participants so that they immediately get some sort of valuable thank you for having taken the time to fill out the survey, in our goal to be more transparent, more interactive, more collaborative about how we're doing things. So that's the proposal for
Don't worry,
the process.
I'll send you the screenshot and
Perfect.
and I'll send you the document.
Yeah, it's. I like it that you have it like you have to put down step by step. So I will go through it and
Okay, thanks
check
guys.
the platform as well. And if I have like any questions.
Yeah. So let
let
me
you
share then the specific questions that we're asking, and just share how we identified what questions would go in there. So I'm just we have this sort of spreadsheet where we planned out all of the surveys.
Mm-hmm.
So so one thing that we thought was really helpful is we think about the network and how we activate our network through challenges. Is that often we start out with the entrant, which is this blue circle, as the core of the network. And then the network expands because we ask the entrant to also review the ideas and give each other feedback, which becomes a really wonderful way for them to learn more about each other and gain value from having engaged on the platform, because they understand their strengths and weaknesses or how people are perceiving it. And also, of course, judges are reviewers, staff are reviewers, and we want to increasingly engage like thought leaders and experts and also being reviewers so that they also become a part of this movement and seeing the ideas and feel a part of the network. So then the network begins to expand. But then there are all the other people that we also engage in terms of network partners that are getting out the word, thought leaders, bloggers, et cetera, et cetera. So we tried to design our survey strategy while keeping in mind that essentially over time you're engaging different people in different, let's say, transactions or events in order to be able to grow your network.
But you send out different surveys, I suppose, to each of the focus groups.
Yeah, but in the very end, our thinking is that you send a relationship survey then to everybody, because they're all a part of the network. So what we did was, this is a very complicated survey, but just in case it's interesting, was we sort of figured out, okay, what are the key transactions, and then what's the relationship survey that we send. And then we came up with a list of questions that we thought were useful, and we did it based upon, remember the very first PowerPoint, this one that talked about the engagement outcomes, and then the ones that said that they need a survey. Mm-hmm. So we looked at what we were trying to measure and made sure that we had a question related to each of it. So we have here the question that we're asking. So for example, by engaging with Ashoka, I feel I'm better equipped to achieve my goals. And then we marked which outcome we believe that that's measuring. So innovators and partners evolve their thinking about their strategy and role in this sector. So we made sure that every single question is something that is relating to a key outcome, that all outcomes that can be measured by surveys are covered. And then we actually looked at let's say right after you've entered your entry, into the challenge, which questions are we going to be asking? And then for the reviewers, what are the questions that we need to ask them while keeping, we have the count of how many questions are in each survey up here. The judges, what are the questions that we want to ask them? And then after sort of at a certain point, so these are all like core transactions, and then there's the network, for the overall network, questions that we want to ask them after a certain juncture towards the end of our challenge activities. So that's how we sort of mapped it out, but the way it looks like in templates is you have number 1, what you send after an entry. Number 2, for reviewers, including entrants, or maybe like thought leaders that you ask to be a part of the reviewing experience. There's a slightly separate one, so this is 2A for judges. And then there's the relationship survey template for after your main challenge activities have concluded. We do have a template for a partnership survey, so a survey you can ask the partner to fill out, although the way we've structured that is that we have the partner actually, we have them do a quick survey so that we can actually get some data on scale, but we have a conversation, and we have a conversation guide where we take notes that helps us to get a more in-depth understanding and build that relationship around really wanting to improve and figure out what's next. So there's a separate sort of process for that. And then there's a template for specifically for sending the survey to the finalists and the winners, especially the ones that we distributed funding to. But we haven't exactly finalized that quite yet because we're still new and doing it through here.
Okay.
So just to recap, I would plan as soon as whenever you're doing the planning, make sure that you account for putting in when you're going to be doing the surveys and when you're going to be, of course, analyzing results, etc. Just to share with you, like what I've been facing is people have been asking me in a very urgent manner, in a last-minute manner, like I need to send this survey out tomorrow because I'm presenting to our E-team in a week. And I think that that's understandable because we're new with the system, but I'd love for us to plan it all out and not feel like we're needing to rush. And it's not an urgent request for me to review or to provide support, but something that's planned out in advance.
I have another call at in 2 minutes, but like one last question. I suppose everything is like in English, right? So how much time do you guess it would take to get it all translated into Spanish? And would this be part of...
So luckily we just translated all of the templates. We just translated all the templates into Spanish, French, and Portuguese.
Ah, it's translated already.
All of our template questions. So that's another reason why it's really good for us to just use the templates, is we don't have to worry about that. But account for if you have custom questions. That's why it's really good to plan it out in advance. If you have custom questions that you need to ask, you definitely want to plan in advance so you have time to get those translated.
Okay, great.
The other thing, just very quickly, to give a update about, a heads up, and I just need to find the link for this very quickly, is we're planning on sharing transparently, because this is the other frustration that at least I've been facing, is that we run surveys, but we don't actually figure out what we're going to change based on the feedback that came through. So I really want to help be supportive about that and have our entrants know that their feedback matters to us, or everybody in the network. So just to share a very quick example of something we're working on launching internally for now, it's going to be, and I'll show you the preview here, it's going to be a page where we actually share across all engagements some big numbers. So, you know, the 78% of everybody who engages with us thinks they're part of a meaningful community or network. You can see some big picture stats about an organization, about a specific challenge, and quotes from it. And then specific course corrections that we identified that we would do and by when, so we can track it in a way that's transparent.
Wow, great.
So right now it'll be internal until we figure out any kinks that there might be. But hopefully we'll nail it enough that we start being very public about this and very transparent about, hey, we're in it to improve this all together.
Okay.
Cool. Well, thank you
Great.
very much.
Yeah, thank you. That was great.
Okay, sorry it
Can you
was a
send me the
little-
last link of the document you had? I think you.
Yeah, I put it in the Hangout, and I'll send you all these links. Sorry, I talked a lot. I think it was maybe a little boring, but I hope it was helpful.
No. If I have questions after reading all the documents, I will write you a mail if that's okay.
Great. Thanks, Giddy. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.